All right, everybody, so today we are going to be looking at an example of how to use Model Builder to automate our spatial analysis workflow. Now, this is going to be a relatively straightforward example, but we'll try to think through how we might scale it to larger examples where it would make a lot more sense to run the spatial analysis through Model Builder. So that we didn't have to sit around on our hands and knees waiting for a very long spatial analysis process to finish. Okay, so this is our example tutorial data that we working with. Remember this from the tutorial in Lab 1. We have our roads here, we have forests, this is the Kawartha Lakes, and we have nesting sites. Okay, so the goal of our analysis here will be to find out which nesting sites are within a certain distance, let's say 100 meters from the roads. We're interested in narrowing our data down to which nesting sites are closest to roads. We want to know a little bit more about those and what kind of birds are there, and just generally how they might be impacted by these roads. There are a number of different ways that we can do this. We can do a selection by location where we select all of the nesting sites within 100 meters of the roads, but we can also create a buffer around the roads and then clip the nesting sites to those that fall within or are contained by that buffer. And that's the approach we're going to take today. And in particular, we're going to automate this with Model Builder. So Model Builder is accessed to the geoprocessing menu up here. Okay, and when we load it, we're presented with what we call the canvas, upon which we are going to load our data and our spatial analysis or geoprocessing techniques. What's neat about this is we can do a lot of dragging and dropping. So of course we want to bring our roads in. They will be our first piece of input data that we will create our buffer around. So we have our roads, that's wonderful. And now we want to add the buffer tool. Now it's right here, you can't drag and drop this, so we're going to need to access it another way. You can insert it if you go and find it in the ArcGIS folder, but the easiest way to do this is really to search for it. So we'll go up here and load the search menu, and we'll just search for the tool in the toolbox. Another approach is just to load the toolbox. Sometimes this takes a while to load though, and you can find it within here. I prefer just to search for the tool. And we can drag and drop this. We'll just drag that buffer in, and notice that it's not filled in. It's not colored when we add it to our canvas, and that's because we have to parameterize it. So we'll double click this, and what we see is the tool, the menu, that we usually see when we try to run a buffer analysis, which we would find if we went to the geoprocessing menu. Okay, so this we're pretty familiar with, all right? And we just need to tell it what our input features are, and we're going to select the layer here that has a little recycling. I don't know why it's recycling, but it has a little recycling picture next to it, and that just indicates that that's the roads layer that we've added to our canvas here. Okay, so that's the one we want to use, and of course Windows is being a little weird on me today. We just need to say yes to this. And of course, you would probably want to change the name of your output, change the location of where you're outputting this buffer. For our purposes, we don't need to focus on that so much. We said we want to create a buffer that's 100 meters. And we have some other options here. For our purposes, we don't really need to change them. I am going to change the dissolve type. such that we dissolve any of the overlap between the buffers of our roads. We'll see what that looks like in a second. And then we're okay. And once we parameterized that analysis, the colorists fill in. So we have our input roads, the buffer tool, and the output roads layer. The next step is to clip the nesting sites to that. So we'll drag and drop our nesting sites in. All right, awesome. And then we need to find the clip tool. Drag and drop that in. And again, we need to parameterize this. So we double click in our input, the things that we want to clip, the features that we want to be clipped. Again, it's going to be the nesting site, in particular the one that I dragged and dropped into the Model Builder canvas already. And again, Windows is being weird on me today. So we'll just say yes to that. And our clip features, the cookie cutter, in other words, is going to be that output that we, in our model, are going to be creating around the roads. Not the roads themselves, but the roads layer, the buffer layer that is to be produced within our model at an earlier stage. And of course, you would probably want to change these where you're outputting your data. For my purposes, so I'm not going to reuse this. I'm just demoing this really quickly. I'm not really going to change this. Voila. Since we've chosen as our cookie cutter the buffer that will be produced from our roads layer as the cookie cutter, the arrow is drawn into the clip. Nesting sites are the features to be clipped, so that's another input to this tool, and the output will be a layer containing only the nesting sites that are within 100 meters of those roads. Just a really important thing to keep in mind here, by default, Model Builder does not output your final data to ArcMap, to the screen, and so we just need to right-click and add it to the display. Okay. Another really key thing, we need to validate our model just to make sure that everything is will resolve as we run the model. May not be exactly what you want. We'll have to check the final output, but at least it will produce some sort of result in the end. That's what we determine when we validate a model. So we'll press that, everything's A-OK, and then we will run the entire model. Okay, so we click that. We get a little window that pops up, tells us what it's doing, and tells us when it's completed. So we'll close that. We'll put this to the side. And it's kind of hard to see. We'll go ahead and turn off the main nesting sites layer and make our clipped nesting sites a bit easier to see. Okay, so all these square points here are going to be those nesting sites that fall within 100 meters of a road. And just visually inspecting our layer, it does make sense. These all do appear to be very close to some sort of road. So this is a very small example of how we would use Model Builder. It is not necessarily easier or faster to run this kind of analysis within Model Builder, although you can save this, and I'm not going to do this here, but you can save your model so that anytime in the future when you do want to do this kind of quick analysis of this data, you can just load this model and run it very quickly. But it gives us a sense of what Model Builder could be used for as well. So you might imagine if we had many more steps along the way in our analysis, it would be good to draw them out and run them through Model Builder. Or if we had many, if we wanted to clip to each of these specific forests, instead of having to clip 100 times, we could iterate through that using Model Builder. Okay, this is just one example of the ways that we can automate our analysis.